everyone and welcome to this crash course on React Native. In the next 45 minutes, you'll learn some key concepts and best practices for building mobile applications using React Native. We will cover a lot of useful topics such as debugging and inspector tools, state management, and creating dynamic styles. We will also explore benefits of FlatList and how we can use it to render data, forms, modals, buttons, and other main components specific to React Native. And as a result of the tutorial, we will build a to-do application. React Native has evolved a lot over the past couple of years and has benefits over frameworks like its HTML-like syntax and OTA updates, so you can update small changes in code like bug fixes immediately without having to redeploy your app on the stores as you'd have to do with other frameworks. And it is a good skill to also put on your resume. One more tip for your resume: if you're trying to upgrade and have a more personal, professional email address, you can register your custom domain with Skiff, which is a private end-to-end encrypted mail. And what I love about it is the transparency and the fact that it is completely open source, which is important for me as a developer, that I'm able to verify the measure they're taking to protect my communication on their GitHub. I also want to thank Skiff for sponsoring this video, and if you want to check it out, there's a link in my description. It is free to sign up and you can immediately start using products like Mail, Pages, Drive, and get a 10 GB storage as well. Now let's get started with building our mobile application. Create the project using this expo command right here, and we're using expo as our package manager. Also, it comes with a lot of benefits that you would have to do manually for Android and platform specific things like linking modules, etc. Expo does it under the hood, and it also is easier for deployment, testing, and etc. You can even run it in your browser. Alright, so I pasted the command in my terminal, and now I'm just gonna give it a name. So that would be React Native to do, and press enter. If you don't have Create Expo app, it's gonna ask you to install, so we can press Y and proceed. Then it will install all the required modules. It's ready, we can cd into it. So cd React Native to do. We can run iOS. So I do have my iOS simulator open, and once we are starting the project for the first time, it should ask us on which simulator we want this to run. So that we open simulator. Expo Go. Basically, it's an application, and inside it's gonna run our project. And let's see once the build is done. On the emulator, and let's take a quick look on what's going on in our files. So we have different folders. This is Expo generated folder. We don't need to change anything in here. Assets folder, this is where icons, images, and other fonts go. For node modules is all the installed modules you need to run your app, and later if you install, this is where you're gonna see it. App.js is where we have this code right now that's running, as you see on the screen, and all the rest of them are configuration files. So let's take a look at app.js and start modifying it. First we have a functional component inside which we have a view. In React Native, assuming you're familiar with React or HTML, equivalent of div would be view. And if you want to write the text, if you write it without wrapping it inside a text, we would get an error. Then we have a status bar here, and this is how we do styling. Instead of just writing CSS, we do create styles as an object, and for that we need to import style sheet and pass in the definitions of the styles. Text input to our app.js. So for that we need to import button from React Native and also text input. So when writing code, basically every element that we write in our JSX that needs to be make sure that it is imported at the top. So if you want to add button takes in title, for example, let's do start. And then we have on press function that we can just add an alert. That's also from React Native. So if I select here, it automatically should import at the top and save this. But the difference between, for example, React and React Native button is that in here we're limited to what we can pass. The title has to be string. But I'll show another way if we wanted more complex button, for example, passing icons, adding more elements inside it. That's definitely possible, just not with the button. So if I press here, alert's gonna show up. We can press OK and we close the alert. Now above the button, I'm going to add text input. And if we just close this, you can see that there was space created, but because we don't have any styling right now, it does not show up. So let's add some styles for here. I'm gonna add another field here for input, and this is going to be, we're just gonna set some height and some width to it. Also, let's add a border and some padding. Now the way we pass styles is style equals, and then we take the styles object and in here pass the corresponding kind of like a class name. So save it and let's do border color gray. Okay, now we can see it, and what happens when we press it, it gets focused, the keyboard shows up as it should on the phone, and we can start typing in the values. We display an array of items onto the screen. So first let's create the array itself and then go over that. Constant data that equals to brackets for the new array. And each array item needs to have a unique identifier. So we can name this ID and make sure we pass it unique. And let's do title. So this is supposed to be to-do items. So I'm gonna do a few of them. Let's do second one, coding. And then journaling. Okay. And FlatList will be used to map them out. It does come with a lot of useful features. For example, you can add a header easily to it, footer, also like separator. Let's say if you want to add border between items, scroll loading, and in the future when you have a lot of items and you're fetching from an API, you know how on certain apps you see a loading indicator, it doesn't fetch everything together because it could be a lot of data. So we do get all of this, but more about that later in another videos. Maybe I can go over it. And what needs a FlatList needs to take in the data, but it also needs to take in the component, like how is it supposed to display each single item. So create the item itself. Let's do to-do item that equals to, just like any like functional component, we can pass props to this item, and then we can return view and text. So we have access to props, and as a props we'll be getting in the whole item. So we can say props.title, and we're wrapping it in curly braces since this is a dynamic value. Okay, now we are ready for FlatList, and let's do that below our button. And first props that we're gonna pass to FlatList would be data, and then this equals to data that we created here. Next, we have to indicate how it's gonna wrap the data, what component it should use. So that would be render item, and inside of render item, we have basically a callback function, because we need to pass the data item to this component itself. And that would be, so we have a first like argument that we are passing, which would be the item. And then what we're doing is we are returning this component and passing props to it. So we're gonna name this item, and that would be the whole item itself. This one would be props.item.title. And the last thing that we need here would be a key extractor. So you're gonna get warning if you don't pass this, because it needs to know, so FlatList needs unique keys for every item. So it needs to know which field is the unique. So once again, we have a callback function here. We take the item and we return item.id, and I'm gonna remove this. Okay, there's extra, all right. In here, I believe. Okay. And now we can see that our items are displayed here on the screen. But what's happening is that these items are stretching out on the whole screen, which pushes this one up. And if you also are using iOS simulator, iPhone has this area at the top, which is kind of like a status bar, but still it's available for applications. So we don't want our screen to be covered by the camera of the phone. So that's where we can use Save Area View. And I'm gonna import this at the top and wrap our application inside it. So instead of view style, we can do Save Area View. Let's save it. And now we are within the visible screen. So we got a warning that encountered two children with the same keys. Here, let's change those. Okay, now it's good. But it's displaying coding because initially they had the same keys. So if we leave same keys, then React Native thinks that it's the same item. So we can refresh the page now. That is done on the keyboard using Command D and reload. Now let's update the styling of these items a little bit and turn them into buttons. So first, I'm gonna add a style here under our styles object. So that would be item, and inside here, I'm gonna start with background color, and let's make this blue. You can also just like type it in the color that you wish it to be. Next, we can add some padding. Let's do 20. And margins. So in React Native, we have, we can't do margin and then pass 4 values or 2 values, which would be top and the bottom. We have to like specifically say which side margin is first. So we are gonna do margin vertical. That's going to be 8. And then let's do margin horizontal, that's going to be 16. And what else? I think that should be good for now. And let's add this item, pass it to our view right here. So that would be style equals to styles.item. And we can change the color of the text to white. Let's add another style. This would be styles.item text, and copy this color, and that would be FFF. We can also do border radius, so it has a little bit more rounded borders. And also let's set widths to full and see how, oops, that would be 100% instead. Now that is not quite exactly what we wanted. We want to stretch this out to the width, respecting the margins. And to understand better what's going on the screen, we can always open debugger, and we're running Expo app. So to open debugger on Expo app for Mac, which is what I'm using, the command would be Command Control Z on the keyboard. And then we select Show Element Inspector. That would turn on this inspector. That lets us tap on any of the components on the screen, and it gives us more information like the styling, and we can clearly see margins which are marked by orange, and then padding and etc. So now we inspected on this view, which is every item, like the button that we created. Then if we go to the parent, it's to do items, so we can navigate like here. So we see the width of this is set to this blue surrounding virtualized list and FlatList. So the width of FlatList is shorter, it does not expand to the full screen. That is why we see such effect. So let's update that. And what I'm gonna do is add another item list, and just like any other component FlatList, we can pass styles. Let's see how. So the style that I'm gonna do is align self and then stretch, because the parent of FlatList is a flex component, so it would just expand itself. And let's remove width 100% from item. Now we're gonna take this list and add another props here, styles, a style that equals to styles.list. Let's save this, and now we get this expanded. We're done with expanding, so Command Control Z once again, hide element inspector. Now we are ready to update the state. So when user types it in and presses this button, we can add another item here. Let's first change the title of the item. Instead of start, I'm gonna name this add to do. So that's one. Another thing is that inside the data, I'm gonna add completed fields, which we're gonna use in the future. So for now, when user presses, we're gonna mark it as completed. But let's set this for now. And to keep track of what user adds in here, we need to create the state, because this data is a static data and we need to be able to update that. So to create the state, we need useState hook from React. And once we have that imported at the top inside our app component, we're gonna create constant items set items and use state. We're gonna create a new state, and by default we're gonna pass data to this state. Let's save this. So for now we shouldn't see any changes other than the text here. So set items should be capitalized, and items keep tracks of the current state of the data. Set items is a hook used to update that state. Check what user is typing, so that would be text input, or we can just do text set text that equals to useState, and by default this would be like an empty string. Okay, now to fetch as user starts typing from here, text input, we need to update and pass that data to text, and the way we do that is on change text hook, and we pass set text. Also, we want to display as this text gets updated. So for the value, we're gonna pass text. Create a function that actually takes the item that user did input and adds it to our current list. So constant add new to do. We don't take any parameters because we can directly access the text item. So let new to do and equals to. So we'll create an object in format of the ones we have in array here. So for ID, we would take the items, that length. So we just want to increment that at every new added to do, and that would give us if this is 3, new item would have 4. Then for title, this is where we take in the text from here. And finally, completed by default is going to be false because user just created it, so it's assumed they need to complete it. Now let's set the items, and we're gonna destructure add previous items that were already there and include our new to do as well. Once this function is ready, we take it and we pass it on to this button that has the title of add to do, and replace this with a dummy code. And wrap this in an array, so that will create a new array for us, copy the items and add new to do as well. Let's update the FlatList because right now it's taking the static data, and we wanted to take in dynamic data, which we have in form of state. Let's save this. And now if we type in something here, for example, learn TypeScript add to do, it should show up. And one thing remaining is that we need to clear the state after we add the items. So set items, and we can also do set text to initial empty state. Let's save this. And if we wanted to, we got the encountered 2 children with same key. Let's instead here increment, because we're starting ID from 1, not from 0, so this is going to be 1. And now if we comment Control Z, reload, and we have like a new, we clear the state, and now we add NextJS, add to do. Now the warning went away. And if actually Next.js is also one of the things you're trying to learn, I have tutorials. It would show up on the top corner of the videos and also in the description, so you can feel free to check them out. Completed and update their state when user presses on them. So to do that, we have to turn this view into attachable opacity, and I will first, it's like a React Native feature, and it sort of acts like a button, and we can pass a function to it. So when it is pressed, there's some function that gets triggered, and let's create that function that should be fired. So constant mark item completed. So here let's just take in an item, and what we want to do is first find the item in an array. So that would be using find index. So let's do constant item index that equals to items dot find index. And then we're gonna use the ID because that's a unique to every item, so it would be easier to find. So that would be, let's say, current item. So we can use the ID from here that equals to item ID. Okay, so we have to make sure that this item exists inside the array, so that would be if item index doesn't equal to -1. If it can't find it, then oops, why do I put constant? I meant if. Yes, that would mean -1 means it couldn't find it in the array. And then we create an updated items list that would be copying data over. And then we update the item at an index that we found. So that would be this index. We can't directly update the state as you know, we have to like set the new state. That is why we created a new variable and constant updated new items that would equal to items find index. So the items stays the same. Only thing that gets updated is its field completed. That is why we mapped out the rest of the fields for the item, like ID and like title. And then final step that we are going to do is we'll set the items to this updated items in here. And that should be it for this function. Let's copy that and paste it to our touchable opacity. So in here we say on press it equals to this function, but we also want to pass the props to this function, and the props that we're passing is the whole item itself. So let's save this and mark item completed. So because this is used, this is initiated after this is defined, we would have to move this inside here, and let's do that. Okay. But we named the index itself item index, so that's what we should be passing. To visually see what items have been marked completed and what have not, we're gonna add different kind of stylings for the items that are marked completed. So once again, we would have to change the item component itself, but let's first add the style for this. So item text, and then we can have item text completed, and we still want the same color, but we're gonna add also text decoration line, and this would be line through, so kind of like a crossover. And we'll copy this, and we're gonna conditionally check, is the item completed, then add this style. If not, then by default add that. So we can say props that item that completed is the field that checks that. Then styles that item completed. If not, leave item text. Let's save this, and I add the journaling and another one. So if I add coding, this would get marked completed, as well as the meditation now. Let's add a model and place this input and the form inside the model and make the model appear when a button is clicked. So the first step would be import. Also, model is like a built-in component for React Native, so we can import that at the top. And then we need to keep track when is model open and closed. So that would be a new state. So is model visible, then we'll have set visible, which by default is going to be false. And let's remove this text, we don't need in here. And we can wrap this status bar, actually we don't need the text input and the button inside the model here. So all the content that we want displayed would show up in the model. And now we don't see that anymore, but we need to add styling because it pushed everything up. I'm gonna add two views here. One would be for the model, like area around the model, and one would be for the model itself. And in the styles, this is the styles what we're going to be adding for the model. So some margins, white background color, border rounded corners, some padding, and then we want to align the border in the center. And this is just like shadow color and its features, and then elevation for the shadow. And then for the centered view, this is same as we have for the container. So you can see flex is 1, justify content is center, and some margin at the top. So first we're gonna set centered view to the model. This would be styles centered view, and then for the other style that would be the model view. And we can move this inside, save that, and by default this is open, so I think the feature is visible. That equals to our state that we created is model visible, and save it, so it should disappear now. Let's also add some other features. Set transparent true, and then on request close, so when it's requested to be closed, then we're gonna set is model visible to false. And we have to add like a button here that will open the model. On press, that would equal to setting model visible to true. So add an item, and then we're able to see this form. Once we press add to do, it should disappear. So let's update that, add new to do inside here. We can also set is model visible and false. So if I do new item right now, add to do, it should go away. You can update this add an item button, and instead of having a text, we can just add an icon that has something like a plus sign, so it's more intuitive. And we'll also learn how to use icons in React Native. So Expo does come in with this library that is installed by default when we created this Expo app, and this is an example of how we can use the icon. So we can pass in the name as a prop, size, as well as the color, and this is where we browse the icons. I have that open in here, and I added plus maybe like an add. Yep, I think this would be what we would need to do, and once we press that, we would get an example of how we can import it and use it. So let's first copy and import icon, and next let's copy an element, and we can place that inside. So the button, we can only pass a title, but if we turn this into a touchable opacity, we can remove the text. On press remains the same, and let's make it so we can pass in items here and save. Okay, it showed the app as plus. Let's also make this add a view and make it like circle surrounding the icon. So we're gonna wrap this inside of a view, and let's name this view styles.icon, and we can navigate now into our styles. So ideally, as the styles item becomes larger, it's better to extract that into a new file. And I'm gonna show you guys how to do that as well after we add the styles for icon. So background color, we can have that to white, and then border radius, if we set to 100 or maybe full, I don't know if that's 100%. Let's add padding. So the size of this one right now is 24, so maybe padding like 10, add some margin as well. And let's add a shadow. For the shadow, I'm just gonna copy it from here, and next we want to make it flex because we want the plus sign to be centered. So if we save it for now, yeah, it is a little off, so let's do display flex. This needs to be in a text. And justify content center. One more align. Okay, and then in case if we have to update the item icon, we would not have to worry about its positioning. It would automatically position into the center. And color, let's pick a different, and I'll just paste this color. It's a little bit lighter. Styles into a separate file, and we will create a new file, name it app.style.js. And once that file is created, we can copy over our styles here, paste them in here, and we would need to only add export since this is in a different file, so it needs to be exported, and then it needs to be imported inside app. So that would be import styles from app.style. So style sheet, and yes, we need to also import the style sheet into this file. So import, that's from React Native, and let's save this. Oh, I didn't do default export, so I need to wrap this into the styles, and here we have. So color code the different items by adding color fields to all the items that we have. And for colors, I got inspiration from this color.com creates palettes. It's easier to just auto-generate it and then visualize it. So I'll be copying colors from here. So third would be this, and we also need to add it inside add new item. So let's do color, and all the new items I guess would be just using maybe this color, or let's do this one. Let's save it, and let's update inside the to item. We have styles, right? So we can do dynamic styles, so we can pass this, and we can also pass background color props.item the color. Let's move this as a footer component of a flat list, and that would be that we would have to extract the button first as a separate component and then pass it to the flat list as a props list footer component, I believe. So that would be this touchable opacity. So we can say constant render add button, and here we can return this one. Save this. Now we can copy and add list footer component, so it would always show up at the end of the flat list. And let's update. We don't want it to, I guess, stretch because it was a circle, so that would be inside styles item. And let's do align self center. Oh, that's the items itself. Yep. Looks good. And if we add another item, let's add that, it will show up with this new color. So further improvements, you can add, I would say, a delete functionality to practice more React Native. You can also make this form more, I guess, add more features, like I would add color picker, so let users add colors, maybe even add an emojis as an icon for the items. And this is just some of the ideas that you can do to practice as well. And if you add features, make sure to join our Discord channel and showcase your projects. We have a separate channel for that on our server. And this will be all for this tutorial. This is my first time doing React Native, and let me know if you guys are interested to see more of this, and I'll see you in the next video.